And we're live. Welcome to the play. I'm used to the playoffs outsiders
Right.
podcast. We've been out of the playoffs for so long now. We are the Lakers outsiders. I am joined by Jameison Welsh. Jameison, how you doing?
Man, I'm good, Anthony, man. Thanks for having me, and definitely appreciate it. It's good to be back. The draft is going on, trade rumors, free agency, all this stuff going on. It's a very, very busy time of the year.
This was, I would say, the most outside looking in the playoffs have ever felt for me as a Lakers fan. I mean, but all the Lakers were never even close to contention. It never looked like they might even be close to it. And then when the playoffs started, I mean, there were very few headlines that even circled the Lakers. It was all Cleveland. It was all Golden State. It was all LeBron. How did you take in the playoffs?
Well, it was definitely being on the West Coast. It was all Golden State first. Going to a few games. I actually went to 3 Golden State games for the playoffs. Went to a game in Portland for the playoffs. It was all other teams, but there was always that lingering. What if the Lakers win the lottery? What if they do this? What if they do that? There's always that lingering what if about the Lakers, because even though the Lakers aren't good right now, everyone knows it's a matter of time before a piece or two gets connected, and next thing you know, they're back. So even though people weren't talking about them for the first round of the playoffs, once the draft lottery came around and they got the second pick of the draft, that was when the Lakers started getting talked about more and more.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think too. I mean, we get a lot more of it than the average fan, seeing as we're so surrounded by it. Um, but I just pay attention to the national headlines. I listen, like I say all the time. I've said it now 3 shows in a row. Dan Levitard owes me money, but I listen to his show all the time, and the Lakers hardly came up. Um, Yeah, no, I mean it's fun to now talk about the Lakers with some substance. Today, the news was out of nowhere. Apparently, the Kings, who have been maintaining throughout all the offseason and even leading into the offseason that they don't want to move DeMarcus Cousins. Now all of a sudden, you're hearing the Lakers are chasing hard for him. Jameson, how are you taking this all in? Starting with the fact that we haven't really heard any demands from anyone in Cousins' camp.
Right, that's the thing. We haven't heard any demands. Now, who knows what's going on behind closed doors? Who knows what's going on, between DeMarcus Cousins' camp and the Sacramento Kings front office? Because there's a lot of instability in that front office, and I think after Mike Malone got fired from Sacramento, I know for a fact, DeMarcus Cousins was very upset at that. Especially since it happened when they were actually playing well, and that happened. That kind of took everybody by surprise, and he didn't like that. And a lot of things got blamed. He got blamed for a lot of things that he really didn't have any control over. So I know there was some ill will there. I don't know what's taken place since then, but I'll say this, and I'll always say this: whenever there's smoke, there's fire. Whenever there's a deal put out there like this, it's gained the traction that it has when no one has really shut it down. Whenever it's gained this kind of traction, whenever there's smoke, there's fire. So there's something to this deal. I don't know if the deal is going to go down or anything. I wouldn't get too confident because the Lakers, the way they usually do things, they usually don't announce these type of things. They usually just happen. So I'm not so optimistic on this going down, but it's a good thing that you hear the Lakers trying to make a big move like this, especially if they don't have to give up a whole lot of assets in order to get it done.
The talk today that was swirling all over, or at least my timeline, I'm sure it was going all over yours too, but was should the Lakers even make this move? Is it worth making the move here? Um, I'm of the stance that I don't want to move that number 2 pick for hardly anything. Now, I know you think a little more highly of Boogie than I do, but for my point, I just like the flexibility that comes with having a extremely talented player for 6-7 years versus Boogie might leave in 3, right? So if it's straight up number 2 pick for Boogie, you do it, right?
Without a doubt, because think about this. As good as Jahlil Okafor could be and may even be in the future, I don't know if he's going to be better than DeMarcus Cousins. Like DeMarcus Cousins, you can make an argument that he's a top 9 player in the league right now. Just for what he gives you and what he provides, you can make an argument he's the best center in the league. Those are things that I don't know if Jahlil Okafor is ever going to be. And if you can get DeMarcus Cousins for that pick while you have other assets and young players, you're in pretty good shape because it'll be like if you trade the number 2 pick for DeMarcus Cousins, it's like you drafted DeMarcus Cousins at 24 years old, and him being in the NBA 5+ years already. It's not a bad situation. My biggest thing with DeMarcus Cousins, I don't worry about his ability to play the game of basketball. Don't worry about that. I worry about his mental situation, and he's on medication that he's prescribed to. I worry more about that than his gameplay. The way he plays the game, I have nothing to worry about. He's very skillful, very talented. He can play in pretty much any system. But, some other things that are kind of alarming in my opinion, I'm more worried about that than anything else.
Now, I don't know if you got it on your timeline, but I had a couple people mentioning back at me today that how good could he actually be? He hasn't even sniffed the playoffs. To you people, I'm going to, again, I rarely do this, but I'm speaking right into the camera. Stop it. Stop it. He plays for the Sacramento Kings, and they're one of the worst, most poorly run organizations in the entire NBA. And they're only, toppled by the purgatory that is the New York Knicks. Just let that go. He hasn't made the playoffs because they've been poorly talented, poorly run, and when they were actually good to start this year, he gets sick, they fire their coach, and he doesn't like that, like Jameison said earlier. Now, where do you draw the line now, Jameison, as far as which assets are you willing to include in a deal to bring him in? Do you stop it at 27-34, which I'm fine with that, I guess, if you're there, but Clarkson, Randall, what are you thinking?
I'm not moving any of the players. I'm not moving Randall or Clarkson. I got to see Randall play, first of all. And I'm not moving Clarkson because I believe Clarkson's a starting point guard in this league right now. So I'm not moving that, knowing what I have. I would move the number 2 pick. If I had to move number 27, I would. But you got to keep one of those picks. You got to keep – well, preferably you want to keep 27 because it has more value. But if I had to move the first number 2 pick, that number 34 pick, I would do that. But also, you understand, Mitch is selling the drop from 2 to 6 is a pretty significant drop. And when you can sell that, that's a huge – number 2 pick is a huge, huge chip. As good as DeMarcus Cousins is, he does come with baggage, a lot of issues there. And also, if things keep on getting worse, the offers get lower and lower. Like, this offer may not be on the table a year from now. Let's say they go through a year with George Karl, things don't work out in the West. We know how tough the West is going to be. If things don't work out, what's going to happen? The value is going to get lower and lower. So this may be the highest value they may get for DeMarcus Cousins. But I will say this. If they're able to swap 2 to 6 and get DeMarcus Cousins and not have to give up a whole lot of other assets, man, you got to do it. You have to. I mean, that's something you have to do. If you can drop down 4 spots and get DeMarcus Cousins, who's the best player in the trade, and only give up another first-rounder or even the other 2 draft picks, you got to do it. But I wouldn't give up all the draft picks and a Randall. I wouldn't do that. You still have to have some young guys to build around to have depth. You have to. We saw how important depth was in the finals. You got to have guys for depth, and you got to have inexpensive guys that can play to create that depth.
I'm actually, I said it a little bit earlier, but I'm of the opinion that Okafor for Cousins straight up, no. But like you say, if you're bringing in the 6th pick as well as Cousins, then okay. Then you still have control of a top end talent for 6 or 7 years, at least fairly cheap, and you get something to mitigate the risk of DeMarcus completely imploding in Los Angeles, or the entire organization imploding, and he books it in 3 years anyway. That you can talk me into, but just Cousins for the number 2 pick, I can't do that. Even if I get it, there are a lot of people, a lot of smart people. You've said it, that he's not going to turn into Okafor, is who I'm talking about now. Probably won't turn into a player as good as Cousins. That's completely 100% logically based. That's no problem whatsoever. I take no gripe with that sentiment. But if he's close and you have the flexibility of somebody $11 million a year for the next 4 or 5 years, man, I'm still not quite willing to go there. Now, I also want to see what other offers. I don't know if Orlando just wants to trade for Boogie just straight up. Have you heard anything on that front?
I haven't heard anything on that front. Orlando's in a weird spot because they can do a lot of different things roster-wise. They have a lot of kind of similar parts in the front court. I don't think they're going to bring Tobias Harris back. I think they're going to let him walk because he's going to get an offer that they probably don't want to match. so they're probably going to let him walk. They have Aaron Gordon there, who's a guy that's a forward. He can do a lot of different things. Really don't know what you're going to get with him. You just don't know what they're going to do. Like, we don't know what the Magic are going to do, what kind of plans they have. So it's kind of hard at this time. It's kind of hard to see what they're going to do. But if they can get, they're thinking that if they can trade Vucevic and if they can get up, get their pick, let's say the second pick or the fourth pick or whatever pick they may get, they're feeling that I guess the proposed trade were to be the Magic get the number 2 pick, the Kings get the Magic pick, and the Lakers get 6 and DeMarcus Cousins or something like that, right? Like, I think that's the proposal. So they're thinking, well, we can get rid of Vucevic and we can still get the number 2 pick. So we're pretty much trading Vucevic for Okafor in a sense. That's their feeling. So they can get Okafor on a cheap contract. They can build around him. They have 2 good guards already. They're thinking that. I just don't know. I mean, I don't know how high people are on Okafor. Everybody's different when it comes to that. I think he's going to be good. I don't think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be good. But at the same time, it just depends on what your value is of Okafor. Some people have different values of Okafor. Some people think, some GMs compare him to Tim Duncan. Some GMs compare him to Sean May. So you just don't know what you're going to get. You really don't.
Sean May. How you got to do that to a North Carolina fan, Jameson? That's not.
I'm just saying, like, people just. I mean, you hear so many different comparisons. Now, he's not going to be Sean May. He's way better. He's bigger than Sean May was, height-wise and talent-wise, and just body-wise. He's just a little bit, just taller and more skilled.
Less round.
Right. Way more. But, Okafor, there are signs there that are kind of scary. But I think he's going to be a good player. I just don't know if he's going to be an all-star player. Like, DeMarcus Cousins is probably going to make the next 5 all-star teams. No matter what conference he's in, he's probably going to make the next 5 all-star teams, which will put him at 6 all-star teams total. I don't know if Okafor has that type of career.
That, and that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned devaluing and valuing and trying to figure out what might Okafor turn into. The debate right now that's been going on for the past, since the Lakers got the number 2 pick and since Minnesota has let it be known that they're leaning toward Karl Anthony Towns, it's turned into a conversation of Jahlil Okafor versus D'Angelo Russell. Which way are you leaning there?
I'm going with D'Angelo Russell. I think that if you can get a guard that can do some of the things that D'Angelo Russell can do, which is run the show, score, get guys involved, and have the kind of court vision a guy at 6'5" can have, man, that's very impressive because the way this league is going towards, you want to have good playmaking guards. You want to have guys that can make plays, that can shoot, and do some of the things D'Angelo Russell can do. When it comes to Okafor, as good as I think he can be, I think that you can get by without having a really good big in this league. I think you can get by without having that. I think if you have a guard that can do so many different things that you don't have to depend on a guard to get him the ball, I think that, having the ball in D'Angelo Russell's hands is just a lot better than worrying about Jahlil Okafor. Now, there's issues with Russell as well. Russell's defense was very hardened-ish in college. It was very shaky, but they asked him to do so many things at Ohio State scoring-wise that's kind of how it worked out. But you really can't go wrong. I'll put it this way. There's no – if you take one, it's a home run. If you take the other, it's a bust. I don't think so. Both are good picks. I personally like Russell a little bit more, but I will caution this. The thing about Russell, he needs to get a little bit stronger at 180. If he's going to be 6'5", 180, really can't play the 2 at that size. Got to play the 1. Got to put on a little bit more size, and I want to see him versus NBA defenses. I think he'll be good, but I would have to see him a little bit more versus NBA defenses geared to stop him when he's the primary perimeter option. So I would be kind of keep. I like Russell a little bit more. The only thing about Okafor is this: as good as he is, he still needs people to get him the ball, and sometimes that's very difficult for a lot of bigs. We saw in the Memphis Golden State series, as good as Marc Gasol is, they have problems getting him the ball for whatever reason there was. So having bigs is not a guarantee to be great because you still have to have 4 guys that get him the ball.
Now, I honestly we had a roundtable on the site today. Go ahead and check that out, everybody. But I honestly, when people ask me which way do you lean, between the two, I honestly want Mitch Kupchak to walk onto the stage with a coin, with Jahlil Okafor on one side and D'Angelo Russell on the other. That's how close it is between the two. Everything again that you said makes a lot of sense. I like that in this current league, and it's so guard heavy, to have a really good guard or somebody who looks like he's going to be a really good guard, especially at both positions. He looks like, he needs to beef up a bit, but he could play both positions theoretically. That it's nice to have somebody like that. But on the other end, I keep on thinking of, I've used this word a few times. Market inefficiency. It's nice to have something that nobody in the league might have. And if Jahlil Okafor turns out to be as good down low offensively as he might be, it's nice to be able to say, yeah, we're unique in the sense that you have to think about that constantly with us. And when you're talking about guys getting him the ball, Clarkson looks like he's apt at getting it. Kobe fed Shaq for a long time. And D'Angelo Russell has, a larger wingspan than the size of my house. So it's nice to be able to feed the ball down low to him. But yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, it's a complete toss-up between the two. Now, if they go Porzingis or if they go Moutier, that's when I'm going to freak out a little bit, right?
Man, if they go Porzingis, Twitter will die. Like, Twitter will not make it if they go Porzingis. That will not work. I mean, I'm telling you, from the Laker fans going crazy to the non-Laker fans with the slander, Twitter would not survive the Lakers getting Porzingis. It won't survive. The servers will be broke. That just would not be ideal for anyone. But the Lakers cannot afford to do that. The Lakers they can't. They're not positioned to take a risk like that. And yes, Porzingis is a risk. I understand the workouts were great. I understand he was great overseas and he wowed everybody. I get that. But to not get an established guy that you've seen in college, that you see play against other NBA type guys, it's a huge risk. And if you whiff on that when other guys can become all-stars and good players, it's a very, very – those are the things that get you fired. Missing on guys in the top 2 and 3 get you fired. So they're not picking Porzingis. Like, that's just not going to happen. Now, he can go to Philadelphia all he wants. He can go anywhere else. But, no, the Lakers can't afford to pick him. No, that just cannot happen. There's just no possible way they could do that.
I mean, it's just Ding wrote an article today that, I don't know, floundered around a little bit, but he, was saying that Porzingis is the unknown and this, that, and the other. And then he wound up coming back to they should still take Okafor and Towns. And I kind of finished the article thinking, what was the point of this? But yeah, the franchise has taken too large a hit in recent years to now double down on all of that incompetency and go with a risk like Porzingis. He might turn out to be, Danilo Gallinari on steroids. He might turn out to be, Dirk. But on the off chance that he isn't, get me the heck away from that guy.
Well, think about like this, Anthony. You gotta understand, like, most of the Euros that come over that get drafted in the top 5, top 10 don't pan out. Like, that's just how it is. The list of guys that don't pan out, it's really long, and that's something the Lakers cannot afford. I mean, if push comes to shove, man, you take D'Angelo Russell, you take Jahlil Okafor, and you go from there. They just cannot afford to take that kind of risk. And even if he becomes the next Dirk Nowitzki, you just can't afford to take that kind of chance, because if you do and you miss, now missing on those kind of picks sets you back 4 and 5 years, especially when you owe your next first-round pick to the 76ers. You can't whiff on these picks. You got to make sure these are home runs. So you got to take the guy that you believe is the most, talented player, the guy that better suits you. And I think at this time, you either got to go Okafor, Russell. I think those are the only two in that discussion if Towns is gone. I wouldn't pick Moutier at 2. If you want Moutier and he's worked out twice for the team, you trade back at 5 or 6 and get him then. You don't draft him at 2. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, and you're talking about, guys. Could you imagine, right? The Twitter blew up today with DeMarcus Cousins potentially coming to the Lakers, and the guy that the Lakers turn down, or if the deal doesn't go down, and then people will, look back playing the result and say, wait, we could have traded this for DeMarcus Cousins, and we didn't do it.
Right. And that's something, like I said, those are the things that get you. Those are the things that get coaches fired. Those are the things that get the bandwagon fans, your fans that are, kind of so fans. They go to different teams. They go across the hallway. They go to the up north. Be Warrior fans. They go elsewhere. And that's what you can't have. You got to make sure if you have a pick. And the one thing the Lakers have done lately is when they've had to make a good pick, even though they haven't had a lot of opportunities to pick in the top 5 and top 10 lately. But when they've had those picks recently, they've made solid picks. They've made good picks. Even in the second round, when they had to make a good pick after spending 1.8 to get that pick last year from Washington, they made that pick work in Jordan Clarkson. So their draft selection's been pretty good. It's just they haven't had to make a pick in a very long time because they've been a contender for a long time. A lot of those picks were either traded away or throwaway picks because they didn't want that extra money on the cap. So they either traded away or stashed guys or whatever. But when they had to draft well, when it was on the money they needed a guy, they really came through.
And, to continue on that thought, you mentioned guys that the Lakers have been able to find late in the draft. First guy comes to mind is Jordan Clarkson. The Lakers also have the 27th and 34th pick at their disposal. We mentioned that potentially as part of the DeMarcus Cousins trade, but you made the point before we came on today. That's where franchises are made. Finding those guys that are going to be super cheap value that, can either be high-end role players or mid-tier role players, but people who can continue to fulfill an important need in your franchise. The Lakers have a gaping hole at small forward. If they could fill that need, right, the draft is a complete success.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, look at what the Warriors did in the draft of 2012. Very similar how it's set up, how their picks were. They had a lottery pick, theirs was number 7, ours is number 2 at the moment. They had pick, I believe, 30 and then 34 or 5. It was right around the same type of situation. Got 3 picks in the top 35. All those guys are either starting or contributors to that team. Harrison Barnes, Festus Ezeli, and Draymond Green. All those guys are contributors on one way or another, and you can make a huge statement and say that Festus Ezeli is a better center going forward than Andrew Bogut is. So those 3 picks, they hit home runs on those. That's what the Lakers need. If they're going to keep those 3 picks, that's what they're going to need because they need depth. Because the problem with the last couple of years, they haven't had a whole lot of NBA players on that team. A lot of guys on that roster haven't been really NBA players on that bench. A lot of guys have been fringe players. They've been in the D-League a little bit too much. You need NBA caliber players that can get better and fill a role on a team. I don't think you need to fill the puzzle all this whole summer. I think you can work your way to the puzzle this summer. This could be the summer we look back and remember back 2015 draft. This is where things got rolling again. That's what the summer needs. You don't need to hit a home run just yet, but you need to get the pieces getting in that direction because next summer, I believe, is when the fireworks happen. Next summer is when things will really get crazy.
And the big thing, because on one hand, it's like, all right, the Lakers should spend money because the cap is going to go up and they're essentially going to get another, the space for another max contract because of the cap jump. And then another one when Kobe comes off of the Bucks, if he finally does hang him up. So on one hand, it's like, yeah, you should spend right now while you can with a lot less risk of hamstringing yourself moving forward. A great way to, not need to spend as much is to fulfill as many needs as possible in this draft. So even though they're talking about, moving out of the late first round, which, makes some sense because it's not guaranteed money that's going to come in. It wouldn't shock you at all, right, Jameison, to see them buy a pick or 2 late again in the draft?
Oh, without a doubt. Or I could see them using that 34 pick and getting a couple of second rounders later on in the draft. I can see that. One thing we got to give Mitch Kupchak credit for, a lot of people, have different feelings about him, but the one thing, he is a guy that once he makes a deal, it's usually in his best interest. Usually whenever he's making a deal, he gets the better end of it. So, if I'm Mitch and I don't know if they need to buy another second round pick because they already have a couple guys that you could say Jabari Brown's a second round type guy. So you don't really need another one of those guys on the roster. Now, if a guy like Upshaw drops and you want to take a stab at him, I think that's the guy you may want to buy a second round pick for or trade and get an additional second round pick for. But outside of a guy like that, I don't know if there's a guy out there you'd want to go out and buy or trade a deep second round pick for. I just don't know if it's out there. But I've heard from some people that Robert Upshaw may not even get drafted because
that's crazy.
Yeah, because I saw him in December live when he was in Vegas. They played Oklahoma, who made the Sweet 16, and he was the best player on the court. He was the best player on the court by far. He was on both ends. He was a big that looked like a lottery pick, and then a week or 2 weeks later gets kicked off the team, and you wonder what the hell's going on. But obviously, there's other issues there. But if he starts to slip and fall, that's a guy you may want to invest a 50th pick on. If you got the 50th pick in the draft, or you can trade up or buy that kind of pick, those are the guys you take a chance on, because Biggs with his skill set, you pray it works out and hope for the best. If it doesn't, it's just a second rounder, and you just keep it pushing.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I saw that today, that he might not get drafted, and it blew my mind. I mean, I don't pay nearly as much attention to the draft as other guys on this very website, for example, but I mean, that's a name that I recognize, and that's a player that I watched, and that's a player that I was impressed with. And to think that that guy might not get drafted, if he's available late in the draft for the Lakers, you have to take that risk because the reward is so high.
I mean, especially you got guys like Hassan Whiteside that are getting, found 4 years later, and pretty much is going to get not a max deal, but is going to get a big deal next summer. Guys like that, you have to pretty much take any kind of chance on bigs that you can, and you just never know. Honestly, you never know how things may shake out, how things may work out. My only concern is a guy like that that's had issues in the past. How does living in LA solve those issues? Sometimes guys may have issues in smaller places. LA makes it worse. So who knows what some of those issues were or are. But if you get a guy like Upshaw in the second round, you got to have to take a look at it. But also there's a guy named Chris Wood who I had the opportunity to see at UNLV. He was a guy that I liked a lot. He's a guy that very talented guy, very poor coaching, a lot of issues at UNLV, administration-wise and structure-wise. But talent-wise, I saw Chris Wood be the best player on the court versus a third-ranked Arizona team. So I see the talent there. He's a guy that he needs to work on a few things, but he's a guy that you take in the second round. If he works out, you're in very, very good shape. He's a top 18 to 20 talent in this draft.
Well, and the nice thing about the predicament the Lakers currently find themselves in is that they can now take a flyer on somebody like that, right? Whereas last year when they bought that pick, there was a lot more pressure on it to produce. This year, it's like you can squander a draft pick or two on a high risk, low or a low high risk, high reward kind of guy. It's all in all, it's night and day compared to this year compared to last year, right?
Oh, without a doubt. But you also got to understand too, whenever you pay for a pick like they did, whenever you give that $1.8 million away, you know who you're picking. Like, you're not just buying that pick just cause. Like,
right.
Whenever you use that pick, whenever you're doing that, you're pretty much selecting someone and saying, hey, this is our guy. If he falls to this spot, we're going to pay this to get him. And that's what they did. So that's how that works. So they had Jordan Clarkson in mind. They said if he falls below this number, we're going to grab him. We're going to pay for him. And once you pay for a pick, he's making the team. Like, you're not paying $1.8 million for him not to make the team. That doesn't happen. So even though he balled in summer league and played very well in preseason, even if he did the opposite, he would have been on that bench because no one's going to waste $1.8 million. I don't care how big the TV deal is.
Makes a bunch of sense. So when you talk about, you mentioned buying a pick, then the other way to go about acquiring a player, and the final way, we kind of alluded to it earlier in the show, to round out the rest of the roster is obviously through free agency. Now, our buddy EJ Christian and I were talking back and forth a lot this past week because so many headlines were coming out of Miami, right? You had the Dwayne Wade fiasco, whatever's going on over there. Then you have Dragic, who opted out. We knew that was coming, but then he got lowballed on their first offer. What's going on in Miami?
Man, there's a lot of things going on right now. A lot of poker being played. This is the time. First of all, you got to understand, the Miami Heat are not going to get punked or suckered and doing anything they don't want to do. Now, they may have to give Wade a couple extra million that they don't want, but that's something that's fine. When it comes to Goran Dragic, 5 years, $80 million, I don't know if you want Goran Dragic in year 4 of that deal. Like, I don't know if you want Goran Dragic in a deal paying him more than $16 million in year 4 of that deal with another year attached. I don't know if you want him in year 3 of that deal, to be honest. So I don't know. That's an odd situation. But when you trade 2 firsts for a guy, you got to keep him. That's another situation. Once you give up 2 first rounders for a guy, hey, it's just one of those things where you got to find a way to make that work. You may see Goran Dragic sign a short-term deal, even though this is his time to cash in. It's a weird situation what's going on. I don't think he leaves Miami, though. That's one of the places he wanted to go. I don't think he leaves Miami.
Now, the only thing that I would have said that I would have shared that sentiment going into this offseason, but the way everything's planned out, almost since he immediately got there, I said this last show, you can't hold the Bosch thing against Miami. That's something that comes completely out of the blue, and frankly, they handled perfectly. They you could argue, you can make the argument they saved his life, with how they treated it. That's something that I believe Jerome Kersey just died from, in the same span of time, right? The pulmonary embolisms.
Right.
So, you had that go on, and well wishes to Chris Bosch moving forward. Hope he gets better. But you have that going on. You have Luol Deng, who I believe can opt out of his deal this year. You have Dwayne Wade's very public and ugly negotiations. This is the most public and ugly it's ever gotten between the two entities. And then, if I'm Dragic, I'm sitting here thinking, well, wait, like, this isn't what I signed up for, and I do think he's going to age better than most point guards because he's so skilled. Now, in year 3 or 4 of that contract, he won't be able to stay in front of his shadow. But for his offensive skill set, I believe he might age decently. And with the cap going up, it's not going to be that terrible a value. What do you does that alter your mindset on him at all?
Well, the cap going up helps a lot of these deals. Like, that's why I thought, the Lakers getting DeMarcus Cousins, if they're able to get that, that's a steal with the cap going up. But the problem with Goran Dragic is this: has he already peaked? Whenever you sign a guy that big of a contract, you want to sign him with his best years going forward. You don't want to pay for a guy that his best years are behind him, and you don't know what you're going to get going forward. Now, once the Miami Heat made that investment into him, they pretty much figured that, hey, whether his best years are behind him or not, this is our guy. Like, once you give up all those things they gave up, that's your guy. I don't see him leaving knowing, because usually when you give up those kind of things, you almost have a wink-wink deal with the agent or with the player saying that, hey, we're going to bring you in and then we're going to sign you this summer. Usually that's how it goes, because you just don't give up what they gave up and then all of a sudden he bounces somewhere else. That just doesn't happen like that. It just very rarely does that happen. But hey, you never know. The way things have gone this offseason and out in Miami especially, who knows what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, I do think we do see Goran Dragic and Dwayne Wade in the backcourt for the Miami Heat in October. I really do. I think that's going to be their backcourt. They'll get whatever issues there are resolved. Luol Deng, I'm not so sure about. I think it's going to depend on who they draft in the NBA draft. If they get Stanley Johnson at 10, they may not need Luol Deng. If they get Stanley Johnson that slips down to 10, they may just roll with him as a rookie, as a starter, who's a pretty much one of the most ready now type players there is. So I don't know if they need a Luol Deng, who really didn't play that well for him last year.
Right, and yeah, oh man, if Johnson slips down to number 10, there's gonna be another party there in Miami, and immediately it's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of pressure on him to immediately start guarding LeBron. That's a great story. It'd be a lot of fun, but man, it's a lot of pressure on the kid. Finally, when you're talking about other free agents, all right, we talked about Dragic. I didn't even want to talk about Wade because that makes less than no sense for the Lakers or Wade.
Right.
But other free agent targets that you could possibly think of, what kind of mindset do you have about restricted free agency? Do you want to hold up the cap for 3 days as you wait for a decision?
For certain guys, yes. Not for everyone, but for certain guys. If I'm the Lakers, the first day of free agency, I'm going to poison pill Jimmy Butler. I'm going to offer him a 3-year deal. You can do whatever you want with the opt-outs, but that first year of that contract, I'm going to have a $25 million. He's going to make $25 million for the first year. Whatever the amount of the deal is, I don't care, but I'm going to poison pill the hell out of it, because if you want to get a guy, you got to go out and get a guy. If that's what it's going to take, you got to make it happen. Because if you get Jimmy Butler this offseason, your rebuilding time, your time of being in the lottery, it pretty much ends. You get a guy like Jimmy Butler coming in, you get a guy in the draft where you trade for DeMarcus Cousins or whatever you get. Now, if you add 2 All-Stars to your lineup, you're pretty much out of the lottery. Even though it's the West is very tough. You get 2 All-Stars, insert them in your lineup with some young guys going forward, you're going to be okay. I poison pill. I wouldn't do it for everyone, but I would pick out one guy, and this year it would be Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler would be the guy I would key in on and make Chicago make a decision, whether they got to dump Joakim Noah or do some things on their side financially to make it uncomfortable for them. Because they don't like really paying players like that. I would poison pill. I would do a 3-year, $60 million deal for Jimmy Butler. I would offer 25 up front, even if I had a signing bonus like the Blazers did Wesley Matthews way back when he was a member of the Utah Jazz a few years ago. I would do something like that. If you really want a guy, you go after him, and if you don't get him, you make things hell on the organization he currently belongs to.
And of all organizations in basketball right now who might not match that, it's Chicago, right?
Well, they may match it, but they're going to think about it. Like they're going to have to think long and hard about it, and they're going to have to move somebody. They may have to move a Taj Gibson or a Joakim Noah or someone else on a smaller scale. They may have to make a move they weren't ready to make, and if things don't shake out, they could lose him, especially if you have to end up paying a guy $10 million up front. There's ways you can make contracts to where you can have some of the money, due right at the time it's signed. I remember when Wesley Matthews was owed, when he signed his full mid-level back when he joined the Blazers, he had, he was got paid $9 million up front because remember he was an undrafted guy.
Yep.
Jimmy Butler's a little bit different. He had some money because he was a late first guy. So it just depends how you want to do it. I'm not a huge restricted free agent guy, but if you're gonna do it, you got to go for it all. If you're gonna go after a restricted free agent, you got to go for one guy only, and make it, give it your all. I think they can do it. We'll see if it happens. We all heard the rumors last week about Jimmy Butler wanting to be in LA, be close to Mark Wahlberg and all that. Who knows what kind of truth there is to that? But I will say, if that's the guy you want, you go after him and you make Chicago think. You make them think long and hard about matching a situation that they weren't prepared to do.
And I'll tell you what, if we go from, and this is a rare instance where I use we as a Laker fan. I try not to do that, but the thought of Jimmy Butler got me that excited. If you go from Wesley Johnson to Jimmy Butler, that in and of itself is one of the better off seasons in recent memory.
Well, think about it like this. Jimmy Butler is probably the second best 2-guard in the league behind James Harden. Now, some people view him as a 3. I view him as a 2 because he primarily plays the shooting guard position. He can defend all 3 positions up front, probably even 4 in some situations. But for the most plays, it seemed like he played at the 2 a lot of this past year. After James Harden, he's better than Klay Thompson. Like, as crazy as it sounds, and Klay's unbelievable shooting guard. I'm a huge fan of his. But defensively, he's a different guy. He's one of the few guys that gives LeBron some issues. Not a lot, but some issues. One of like 3 or 4 guys in the league that can play LeBron fairly well and hold his own. So, no, Jimmy Butler's a guy that if you can get him and you get him while he's young, you got to make that happen. You got to make that work, and you got to make life miserable in Chicago. So even if Chicago does match it, they got to do some wheeling and dealing on their end to make some numbers work. So that's a guy I go after very heavily.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more on that front. We'll do one more free agent. We'll do unrestricted free agent here. I know LaMarcus Aldridge was rumored to be linked to Los Angeles. The tough thing is on our part, right, Jameson, is that everybody gets linked to the Lakers, right? Like if you're an agent and your client is a free agent, why not link him to the Lakers, especially when they have cap space?
I'll put it this way, man. And they always say, well, such and such has a house here. Well, most people have homes in Las Vegas and L.A. Like most NBA players have a home in L.A. or they love being in L.A. Most guys do. That's just kind of how it is. So I don't understand, that's the drawing point. I know it gets people up in arms. And also, whenever you mention the Lakers' name, it helps your value. The Lakers being interested in you enhances your value across the league. That's just how it goes. So we'll see what takes place. I don't think LaMarcus Aldridge will be a Los Angeles Laker. It's going to be very difficult for him to pass up the money Portland's going to give him. I think he's eligible for 5 years, 120 plus from Portland. I just don't know if he's going to be able to pass that up. But if he does, he goes to Texas, goes probably to San Antonio, get the no state tax, get whatever they can pay him, and keeps it pushing to get a chance to win a ring. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll see. But I don't think he's going to be in L.A. Same thing with a guy like Marcus Gasol. Obviously, LeBron's not going to come to L.A. Some of the guys, because we get those questions. You get those questions.
You do.
Free agents and whatnot. Certain guys just aren't coming. But for the most part, this summer, I don't think we're going to see a lot of movement between free agents this summer. I think next summer is a summer where you see big guys like a Kevin Durant on the move.
This is a great year, I would say, to stay in the wing position Not talking about LaMarcus Aldridge, kind of going back to Jimmy Butler, but when you're talking about potential wings for the Lakers to go after, a guy like Danny Green makes a whole lot of sense, especially if they do draft Okafor and you need somebody to just spot up in the corner and free up space for Okafor, Randall, and then Kobe when he eventually wants to go down low, because he likes to go down there too. If you had to put your money, I mean, you're out there in Vegas. I don't know how much gambling you do out there, but if you had to put your money on a potential free agent to come and be a Laker this year, which way would you probably go?
It's tough because a lot of a guy like Danny Green more than likely wants to go home to New York. Like, he wants to make his money and play at home in New York and get some endorsements there. So I don't know if that's a guy the Lakers can get if they want him. Also, you got to understand, a guy like Danny Green is a system player for the Spurs. And a lot of guys who are system players for the Spurs don't play that well after they leave the Spurs. So you got to be very, very cautious of guys like that. I honestly think Jimmy Butler is in play. I really do, because the Chicago front office, they haven't really done things, by the book, or they haven't really done a lot of great things lately. I think if you can offer a poison pill type deal, make them kind of think about things and make them really think about that cap situation and have to make a deal that they don't want to do regarding one of their other players, they may decline to get Jimmy Butler back. They may decline. They may just say let him go or agree to some sort of sign and trade and keep it going. So I think Jimmy Butler's probably the most realistic guy. I don't see them going after Brandon Knight or anything like that. I don't see that. Or I don't see Greg Monroe. I don't see anything like that. When it comes to free agents, I don't see the Lakers working on free agents this year. I think next year they're going to go all in with KD, assuming he's healthy.
And I'd be perfectly fine with that. So lastly, I guess we'll close out on this note. I wrote last week about Lamar Odom's struggles off the court since he wrapped up his time in the NBA, and man, you find out Robert Little of Black Sports Online reported he lost another friend to a similar situation. Let's go ahead and round out our podcast here on your favorite Lamar Odom memory and get some positive vibes out there in the blogosphere for this guy.
Well, I'll put it this way, man. Lamar Odom is one of the most, probably the nicest, ball players that are actually good to the people. Like, just in general, he's not a guy that doesn't have a huge ego, doesn't have a guy that's gonna have an attitude. Very nice guy, just a very welcoming guy that seems like a regular person. You wouldn't think he's an NBA player. Wasn't 6'9" or 6'10". Just wouldn't think of that. He just has a different nature about him. On the court, there's a couple of things that stand out to my mind, but in the clinching Game 5, there was a layup he had. I believe it was a left-handed layup high off the backboard that pretty much sealed it versus Orlando in Game 5. That was probably his finest moment as a Laker. And, of course, he had like 20 games in the playoffs the next year versus Phoenix to kind of get that series up and running. But that lefty, I think it was a lefty layup. That was like a reverse layup high off the glass. And that was, it was fun and He's been through a lot, man. He's been through a whole lot in the NBA and outside the NBA. Been through a whole lot. So for him to get that ring in LA and be a major contributing piece of that was huge, man. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of jokes out there, a lot of Kardashian jokes and whatnot. But when LO was a Laker, man, he gave it his all. He wanted to be a Laker. He took pride in being a Laker. And not a whole lot of guys have done that since. I think a lot of fans are taking that for granted. A lot of random players have come here since. But Lamar Odom took pride in being a Laker, and you got to respect that.
Right. I mean, it takes quite the humble guy to come off the bench to be the sixth man with the prodigious talent that he had, right? And it was best for him. That was when he prospered the most. So it was, it wound up being mutually beneficial. But, there was all those stories about Andre Iguodala doing that this year. But Lamar Odom was a lot more talented, I would say, than Andre Iguodala. And for him to just suck that up and play that role, it says a lot about the dude's character. I can't even, I'm not even going to try to top your kind words about the guy. I just want to make sure I wish the guy all the best, because all the loss that he's endured in his life, eventually it's got to turn around, man. So thoughts and prayers going forward for you, Lamar. Jameison, go ahead and plug something that you're working on right now. I know you're, the hardest working man I know. What all do you got going on?
Man, well, it's draft week, so we're just very busy right now on a lot of different fronts. Tomorrow morning, Fox Sports in New Mexico, 7 a.m. Pacific time. Wednesday, we have several shows going on. We have Vegas, The Score, 6:70 a.m. from 10 to 11 a.m. We have ESPN 1480 in Nebraska, sometime between 12 and 2. And then we have KOAL 7:50 a.m. in Utah, I believe sometime between 3:30 and 4 Wednesday. So Wednesday's going to be a very busy day. And then we got the draft on Thursday. It's going to be a very hectic day. But, hey, man, this is what we do, man. It's one of those things where you just keep the ball rolling. And also got to give shout-outs to my guys, Tom and Benjamin at BelieveTheHypeNBA.com. They always take care of me for pretty much everything. So got to give them a lot of credit and a lot of love, man, because they don't have to do what they do. So I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, those guys, you guys run a great show, and you guys heard everything that Jameson's working on right now. That's a long-ass list. I was sitting here complaining that I had to write, like 6 or 7 articles today with all the, the rumors and the news and the tweets that went out like that. But that was a big-ass list that you just listed off there, and you're doing all that. Man, shout out to you, and thank you for coming on today. Thank you for the mentorship that you've given me to this point. I also want to send, kind words to all the support we've gotten. We just started the Facebook page something like, a couple weeks ago, and we're upwards of 100 likes on that. So keep that coming. We really appreciate that. We really appreciate guests like you, Jameson, and everybody else who come on and uplift the rest of our show. Take care, man.
Not a problem, man. Thanks for having me. Definitely appreciate it. Got to do it again soon, probably after the draft if possible, because there's going to be something's going to happen. Like whether we draft Okafor or Russell or trade or whatever, it's going to be something that takes place. So after the draft, we can make it work. That'll be fun.
That, and we're all going to be at the Summer League together, I believe, right? You're out there in Vegas as it is, so I imagine we'll all run into each other.
Yes, I'll be at Summer League. I can't do too many days of Summer League in a row because the bad brand of basketball gets to you, but I'll definitely be there for the Laker games. We'll definitely make that work. I'll definitely be there for at least the first 2 Laker games, and we'll see how the schedule works from there.
Yep, sounds good, man. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.